In psychology, there is a special term called Adele syndrome, which refers to the morbid obsession one person can have with another. This condition is named after Adele Hugo, the youngest daughter of the famous French writer Victor Hugo. Adele was an attractive and talented pianist, but unrequited love severely affected her mental state. Her obsessive behavior ultimately poisoned her own life and that of her lover, whose life and career she ruined by pretending to be his wife for years. Adele spent 43 of her 84 years in a psychiatric hospital. This condition, where one person is overly interested in or obsessed with another to the point of losing emotional control, is relatively common. Experienced psychologists can often help, but in severe cases, hospitalization and intensive therapy are required. Sometimes this obsession can border on insanity, pushing individuals to desperate, unpredictable, and extremely cruel actions. One of the most brutal cases of obsession occurred in 2008 and shook all of Europe. Emma Jangestig, a native of Stockholm born on February 16, 1985, was involved in a case that became infamous in Swedish forensic history. Emma grew up in a simple family as the younger of two daughters, alongside her older sister Kathleen. At 19, Emma married a young man named Nicholas, whom she had been dating since high school. She was already expecting a child at the time of their marriage. Emma gave birth to their son Max at 20 and a daughter named Saga a year and a half later. Despite having two children, Emma and Nicholas were too young and unprepared for the challenges of family life. They frequently quarreled and could not find common ground, leading to their separation after their daughter's birth. The custody battle for their children was painful and difficult. Nicholas wanted to be involved in their upbringing, while Emma was not opposed but soon entered a new romantic relationship. She moved with her children to Arboga, a small town 150 kilometers from Stockholm, to live with her new lover, which Nicholas opposed, wanting to see his children daily. The ex-spouses met in court multiple times to settle custody issues, and Nicholas even threatened Emma, leading her to report him to the police. Unable to resolve their differences peacefully, each parent sought sole custody. During this tumultuous period, Emma met Tony Hellberg through the internet, beginning a new chapter in her complicated life. They quickly found common ground, grew close, and a romantic relationship blossomed. The young man wasn't deterred by the fact that the 23-year-old woman already had two children from a previous marriage. He had longed for a family and was ready to accept them as his own. The couple initially lived in a small house inherited by Tony, but as their relationship progressed and they decided to get married, they moved to a larger home where each child could have their own cozy room. Tony had a good job with a decent salary, while Emma, a designer by education, stayed home to raise the children but planned to work in her field in the future. The couple planned to marry in the summer of 2008, but fate had other plans. March the 17th, 2008 was an ordinary Monday. Tony left for work early in the morning, leaving Emma at home with 3-year-old Max and 1.5-year-old Saga. In the evening, Emma prepared dinner while waiting for her fiancé to return and chatted online with her sister Katarina, discussing a gift for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. Around 6:30 p.m., Emma received a call from Tony, who informed her he would be late and that they could start dinner without him. After the brief call, Emma continued her household chores, fed the children, and resumed her conversation with her sister. At 7:07 p.m., their communication was abruptly cut off mid-sentence. Katarina found it strange, as she saw Emma typing but never sending the message. Worried, Katarina called Emma but received no answer. She then called Tony, who was on his way home, and assured her that everything was fine, suggesting Emma was likely busy with the kids. When Tony arrived home, he was surprised to find the front door unlocked. Upon entering, he immediately noticed a mess, thinking the children had been playing. However, he soon saw brown stains on the floor and realized with horror that it was blood. Calling out for Emma and the children with no response, he ventured further into the house and found a figure lying in an unnatural pose. Initially thinking it was a doll, he soon realized it was Saga, lying in a pool of her own blood with her head and face disfigured beyond recognition. Nearby lay her brother, Max, in a similarly horrifying state with a fractured skull. Emma was also on the floor, covered in blood, with her face shattered and disfigured. In shock, Tony pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands and dialed emergency services. At that moment, Emma let out a loud, long groan. Police officers and paramedics quickly arrived on the scene, finding a weak pulse in all 3 victims. They immediately began resuscitation efforts. The scene was horrifying, and no one could understand what kind of monster could commit such an atrocity. Saving the victims' lives was the priority, and all efforts were focused on getting them to the nearest hospital for urgent medical assistance. From the outset, paramedics doubted whether the victims could be brought to the hospital alive. However, when they arrived at the medical facility, all 3 were still alive. They were diagnosed with open head injuries, severe brain damage, and extensive blood loss. The doctors offered no prognosis but did their best to save them. Max and Saga were in critical condition, and even if they survived, it was unlikely they would ever be able to breathe on their own. Emma's condition was assessed as very serious but stable. She was placed in a medically induced coma and hooked up to life support machines, hoping her body could recover. While doctors fought for the victims' lives, forensic experts worked at the crime scene, searching for clues and trying to reconstruct the events. The house was in chaos, with scattered belongings and blood on the floor and walls. The paramedics had left behind clutter and moved items around to access the victims, complicating the investigation. The floor where Emma, Max and Saga were found was trampled on, making it difficult to distinguish the perpetrator's footprints from others. Remarkably, the intruder had massacred the victims within 13 minutes, as the last message from Emma to her sister was sent at 7:07 p.m., and the police received a call from a frightened Tawny at 7:20 p.m. The brutality of the attack suggested a personal motive and a deep hatred for the victims. The weapon used was presumed to be a blunt and heavy object, possibly a hammer, but it was not found at the scene, indicating the perpetrator took it with them. Tawny was the prime suspect initially. He wasn't married to Emma and wasn't the father of her children, leading investigators to consider a domestic quarrel as a possible motive. However, Tawny had an ironclad alibi. His boss and colleagues confirmed he was late at work, and CCTV footage showed him walking down the street during the time of the massacre. Despite this, Tawny was questioned for any potential information that could aid the investigation. He could only recall the unlocked front door, which suggested Emma had let the perpetrator in. After questioning, Tawny was released. He had already informed Emma's family, who rushed to Arboga from Stockholm. Tragically, on their way to the hospital, they learned from the news that Max and Saga had died from their injuries without regaining consciousness. The new suspect was Emma's ex-husband, Nicholas, the father of the children. Although they had been divorced for over a year, their relationship was fraught with constant quarrels and custody battles. Nicholas had even threatened Emma, which she reported to the police. After the separation, Emma took the children to live with her new partner in another city. Frustrated by the custody battle and his hostility towards Emma, it was speculated that Nicholas might have taken a desperate step, leading to the horrific crime. Nicholas was immediately tracked down and taken into custody. He seemed crushed by the news of Max and Saga's deaths, sobbing and constantly asking if there was some mistake. When charged with the crime, he was initially stunned, then vehemently denied any involvement, insisting he would never hurt his children, whom he adored. When asked about his whereabouts during the crime, Nicholas claimed he was in another city on business. Although it sounded strange, his alibi was soon confirmed. He was indeed 120 miles away from the crime scene when the massacre occurred. Forensic investigators remained active at the scene, searching for clues, evidence, or traces of the attacker. The perpetrator had obviously worn gloves, leaving no fingerprints. The task of identifying shoe prints was complicated by the numerous medics who had been at the scene to assist the victims. The law enforcers feared the criminal might attempt to sneak into the hospital to finish what he had started, as Emma was a crucial witness. Therefore, a 24-hour guard was posted outside Emma's room. Neighbors were interviewed for possible witnesses. One woman recalled seeing a stranger in black clothes walking around Emma and Tawny's house around 5 p.m. She couldn't see the person's face because it was hidden by a hood, but suggested the figure was short and fragile, possibly a girl. This same figure, in black clothes and with a hood, was also captured by a street surveillance camera near a store a few minutes' walk from the crime scene. Law enforcement noted the figure appeared to be a short, frail-looking girl. The recording was shown to Tawny to see if he could identify the stranger. Upon seeing the first frames, Tony's face turned pale. He suggested the figure might be his ex-girlfriend, 31-year-old Christina Schürrer, although he couldn't be certain. Christina Schürrer, Tony's former sweetheart, was born in Hanover, Germany in 1977. Her father left the family when she was a child, negatively affecting her mental state and behavior. Christina grew up willful and purposeful, but had a complex character. As a teenager, she went to the United States on an exchange program and lived in New York for several years. She received a good education in history and archaeology, traveled extensively throughout Europe, and participated in excavations and expeditions. In the summer of 2006, Christina went to the Greek island of Crete and worked as a tour guide at a popular hotel. There she met 26-year-old Tony, who immediately attracted her. Tony also found Christina to be smart, interesting, and educated, leading to an affair from the first days of their acquaintance. Christina was 29 at the time, but the small age difference did not bother them. Their connection lasted for a week while Tony was on vacation at the hotel. After he left, they continued to communicate by phone and correspond on the internet. Christina came to Hellberg in Sweden and asked to stay at his house. Her behavior seemed intrusive and tactless to Tony. When she suggested a weekend trip to the mountains, he refused, hoping it would be their last interaction. However, Christina continued to call, write, and insist on meeting again. In January 2007, during a phone conversation, Tony told Christina that their relationship was over and they should not meet again. But Christina pretended not to hear him. She continued to ask to visit him and go on vacation together. In the spring of 2007, Christina came to Sweden again and began to stalk her former boyfriend. She tried to persuade him to resume their relationship, but he honestly admitted he was already dating someone else. Christina then claimed she had left something at his house during her previous visit and needed to retrieve it. Tony agreed, but when they entered his home, Christina attempted to seduce him. After receiving a firm refusal, she threatened that he would regret it. 3 months later, Christina returned again, apologizing for her behavior and trying to reconcile, but Tony rejected her. That evening, she called him, claiming she had swallowed pills because she couldn't live without him. Tony called an ambulance and informed her family, advising them to seek psychiatric help for Christina. After receiving care at the hospital, her mother took her to a psychiatric hospital where she stayed for over a month. However, the treatment had little effect, and Christina remained obsessed with Tony, constantly thinking about how to get him back and inventing new reasons to meet. In October 2007, Christina decided to move to Sweden, settling in the suburbs of Stockholm with another girl. She resumed her pursuit of Tony, eventually meeting him and claiming she had given birth to his son, but had given the child to a foster family. Tony was shocked and skeptical, especially since their last intimate encounter was over a year ago, and Christina had shown no signs of pregnancy during their subsequent meetings. Christina's explanations were evasive, with new details added each time. In January 2008, Christina's obsession reached new heights. After numerous unsuccessful attempts to meet with Tony, Christina sent him a message claiming their son had a hereditary disease and they needed to go to Germany together to see him. She added that the child's adoptive father would contact him with details. At this time, Tony and Emma were in the process of moving to a new home, and Emma was aware of the whole story. She believed that Christina was trying to lure Tony to Germany and that no son existed. When Tony received a call from a man claiming to be the adoptive father, he, on Emma's advice, began asking detailed questions about the boy's birth and medical history. The caller was clearly annoyed, avoided answering, and eventually hung up. This confirmed to Tony that Christina had fabricated the entire story and had someone play along with her deception. Detectives quickly found out where Christina lived and went to the address. Her roommate informed them that Christina had hurriedly packed her things the day before and said she was returning to Germany. A check confirmed that she had indeed left the country, so the Swedish police sought help from their German colleagues to arrest her. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for her arrest. When Christina was arrested, she claimed there had been a mistake and she had nothing to do with the massacre. However, after she was taken to Sweden on March 29th, she immediately requested a meeting with Tony, which was denied. She remained calm but periodically asked to meet or call her ex again. Christina's rented apartment was thoroughly searched, and her phone and laptop were seized for inspection. All her clothes were checked, but no traces of blood were found. Investigators had identified which bloody shoe prints at the scene did not belong to the medics or family members. They determined the shoe was athletic and identified the brand and appearance, with the size matching the one worn by the suspect. Christina claimed she never owned such a model of sneakers, but this was quickly refuted as the shoes were identified by her. The investigation took a significant turn when forensic experts matched a strand of Christina's hair found at the crime scene. Coupled with the shoe print evidence and the fabricated story about the son, the evidence against her grew compelling. Christina's obsession with Tony led her down a dark path, culminating in a brutal attack on his new family. The police's diligent work in uncovering her lies and tracking her movements brought her to justice, ensuring she could no longer harm others in her desperate attempts to reclaim a lost relationship. Detectives found alarming evidence on Christina's laptop. It was filled with photos of Tony, both alone and with his new lover, Emma. In a separate folder with a disturbing label were pictures of Emma and her children, copied from Emma's social media page. Each photo was captioned with threatening and insulting remarks. The search history revealed queries on how to commit murder without leaving traces, how to hide crime evidence, and how to divert suspicion. Notes found on the laptop included detailed plans of Emma and Tony's new home, indicating when Tony left for work, when he returned, and the family's daily routine. Emma's condition stabilized, and doctors decided to gradually bring her out of the medically induced coma by the end of March. Upon awakening, she was unable to speak due to the breathing tube, but clearly recognized her relatives. However, she had no memory of the attack and believed she had been in a car accident. When Emma was strong enough to speak, the police decided to interview her without revealing the fate of her children initially. Emma had no memory of the events of that fateful day and kept asking about her children. Initially, she was given evasive answers, but eventually, her family and medical team decided to tell her the truth. Upon learning about the attack and the death of her children, Emma became hysterical. Doctors had to sedate her, and each time she woke up, she asked about her children again, unable to remember the previous conversations. This continued for several weeks, with Emma repeatedly asking about her children and having to be told the tragic news each time. After another month, doctors decided to bring Emma to the crime scene, accompanied by medics. Inside the house, Emma suddenly remembered everything. She recalled texting with her sister while setting the table, with the children playing nearby. There was a knock on the door, and when she opened it, she saw a dark, short female figure. As she asked what the figure wanted, she felt a sharp pain and blacked out. The figure entered the house, and in a desperate attempt to protect her children, Emma tried to chase her but apparently fell in the hallway. With Emma's recollection and the overwhelming evidence found on Christina's laptop, the case against Christina became undeniable. Her obsessive behavior, coupled with the detailed planning and execution of the attack, led to her being charged with the brutal assault on Emma and the murder of Max and Saga. Christina's actions, driven by a twisted obsession, resulted in a horrific tragedy that devastated the lives of those involved. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Christina stubbornly denied her guilt. The murder weapon, presumed to be a hammer, was never found, and most of the evidence was circumstantial, giving her a high chance of getting away with it. However, during the investigation, Christina's roommate mentioned that a hammer from her toolkit had gone missing in March. The toolkit itself was produced, and the investigation determined that the size and configuration of that brand of tool matched the murder weapon. Although this was also circumstantial, it added to the mounting evidence against Christina. Detectives found surveillance footage from a suburban bus station showing Schürrer traveling to Arboga 3 times in the week before the crime. Christina could not explain why she visited so often, but it appeared she was monitoring her future victims. Additionally, she could not justify why she had been searching the internet for information on covering up a crime, or why she was collecting photos of Emma and her children. On July 29, 2008, Christina's trial began. She was accused of double murder with particular cruelty and attempted murder. Throughout the trial, Christina behaved bizarrely. She smiled and waved at the courtroom attendees and laughed when shown gruesome footage of the crime scene. Her behavior suggested insanity, but a psychiatric examination confirmed that she was sane and fully aware of her actions. This indicated that Christina enjoyed what she had done and did not even try to hide it. Emma, present in the courtroom, fainted upon seeing Christina. When she regained consciousness, she stated that she remembered everything, confirming that Christina's face was the last thing she saw on that fateful day. Despite the defense lawyer's attempts to prove her client's innocence, the jury unanimously found Christina guilty on all counts. Christina was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release. She was also ordered to pay $20,000 in compensation to Emma. No evidence was found that Christina had ever been pregnant or given birth to a son by Tawny. Emma's recovery was long and arduous, but Tawny remained by her side. They married in the summer of 2010 and now raise 2 children who know the tragic story of their older siblings. On October 16, 2022, at around 1:00 p.m., emergency services received a call from an Apple Watch. The operator asked, 911, "What are you reporting?"
911, what are you reporting? Hello? What's going on there?
The caller, a woman, seemed very upset and was hard to hear. The dispatch team could pick up sounds of a struggle and banging in the background before the call abruptly ended. It seemed like the woman was trying to send a message by tapping buttons on the watch since she couldn't speak. The dispatcher reassured her, saying, "Just hold on. My partner is on the way to help you. Can you hear me? I won't hang up until help arrives." At first, it was tough to figure out where the woman was because she couldn't talk. But thanks to the location data from the Apple Watch, they were able to find her in a suburban neighborhood. The police were quickly dispatched to the address they identified. Fortunately, the Apple Watch was still connected to the call, allowing them to hear the sound of a police car arriving at a house on Rosberg Street Southeast. The police announced their presence loudly, saying, "Police Department, if you're inside, make yourself known." However, when they entered the house, it was empty. They found signs that something had gone wrong. The front door was wide open, and the garage was in disarray. Inside, they discovered the broken pieces of the Apple Watch that had called 911, but there was no sign of the woman. Shortly after, 2 young people showed up at the house. Crystal, a 22-year-old, and her 11-year-old brother claimed to be the children of the homeowner, a 44-year-old woman named Young. Crystal told the police that earlier that day, she, her mother, and her brother had gone to church, which was a regular Sunday routine for them. When they returned home, they saw their father's minivan in the driveway. This wasn't unusual, as her parents were going through a divorce, and their father typically visited once a week to take care of some things. Crystal explained that her mother had asked her to take her brother out of the house for a bit so the adults could talk privately. Just after 1:00 p.m., while they were driving back, Crystal received an automated emergency text from her mother's phone that included a map to their home. When they returned, however, the minivan and their mother were missing, and the police were outside waiting. The police quickly came to the conclusion that Minho, the father, had likely taken Young hostage. They issued a missing person alert throughout Thurston and Pierce counties and turned to social media to spread the word, hoping the community could help them find her. And other law enforcement agencies joined the effort to locate the light, blue Dodge Grand Caravan driven by Young. Sadly, the response was minimal at the time, so let's rewind for a moment and delve into the family's background to understand what led to this situation. Initially, the family appeared ordinary, but there were underlying complexities. Minho, the father, had a previous military background involving intelligence work. Some speculated that his past service might have contributed to his sensitivity and stress levels. Furthermore, Minho and Young's marriage was troubled. Reports indicated that Minho had a volatile temper, particularly towards his wife. Young had confided in others about Minho's repeated threats to harm her as their marriage deteriorated. Young had made the decision to leave them for the safety of herself and their children, unaware that these threats would soon turn into a frightening reality. It all began as a typical October Sunday for the kids and their mom. They returned home late that morning to find Minho inside. After exchanging greetings, Young asked Crystal to take her younger brother outside for a while, so she could speak privately with Minho about adult matters. Specifically, they needed to discuss their impending divorce and how to divide their finances. The details of how the situation escalated remain unclear, but the conversation quickly became heated. Young told Minho to leave because she couldn't handle the conflict anymore. However, as the argument intensified, Minho's anger grew. After storming out momentarily, he returned in a furious state. Finding Young upstairs in her bedroom trying to rest after the argument, Minho burst in and began attacking her. He repeatedly struck her in the head and violently threw her to the ground. Despite Young's efforts to defend herself, she was no match for Minho's strength, particularly given his military training. Minho continued his assault, threatening to end her life rather than share any of his retirement savings with her. To ensure she couldn't escape or call for help, Minho bound Young's hands behind her back with duct tape. He also tightly bound her ankles and thighs, rendering her completely immobile. To further restrict her movement, he taped over her mouth and eyes, leaving her unable to see or speak. After a while, Minho parked his van outside and returned to the house. During this brief absence, Young managed to partially free one hand and used her Apple Watch to send emergency texts to her children and call 911. Minho then dragged Young down the stairs and across the floor, which caused muffled screams, thuds, and struggles heard during the call to 911. Being skilled in intelligence, Minho noticed the smartwatch on her wrist and, unwilling to take any risks, grabbed a hammer and smashed both the watch and her wrists until it came off. Unbeknownst to him, the watch continued to function and lay on the garage floor, aiding the police in locating the house. After forcing Young into the trunk of his van, Minho drove away swiftly, passing a police vehicle. Inside the trunk, Young was blindfolded, gagged, and tightly bound. Despite these harrowing circumstances, she attempted to open the trunk door with her toes during the terrifying drive. Unfortunately, her efforts were futile due to her restraints and inability to see. As the suburban landscape gave way to a dense, lush forest, Minho's madness persisted. Abruptly stopping in a clearing, he dragged Young out, threw her to the ground, and retrieved the shovel from the van. Young could only stifle her cries as Minho began digging a hole nearby, clearly intending to bury her alive. After digging for some time, he cruelly stabbed Young in the chest with a long, thin knife. He then tossed her into the shallow pit and callously added insult to injury by throwing a heavy log on top of her, declaring that she would die there. Despite everything, Young managed to move her head slightly to create a small air pocket to breathe. Unnoticed by Minho, he continued to pile dirt over her and left, believing she would suffocate and perish beneath the earth from her injuries. However, the hole Minho dug wasn't deep enough to suffocate Young. It was only 19 inches deep. Despite the weight of the wood and dirt immobilizing her, she managed to remain alive for about 19 hours. Young lay in the shallow grave, determined to survive and escape. Eventually, she found a way to loosen the wrist restraints and began digging herself out. First, she freed her hands, then pushed the dirt away from her body and head. After a tremendous effort, she finally freed herself from the grave and tore off the duct tape from her eyes. Initially disoriented and thinking she had been abandoned in the forest, Young was surprised to see Minho's minivan still parked nearby the hole. Fueled by adrenaline, she pushed the heavy log off herself, ran as fast as she could, and escaped back to the police and her family. They were deeply concerned for Young's safety and meticulously examined every piece of evidence. The most compelling evidence came from numerous CCTV recordings from neighborhood doors and streets. One camera captured a man in a white t-shirt and dark shorts entering Young's garage, followed shortly by a minivan speeding away from the house, passing a police SUV, and heading south. Despite their intensive search efforts that day, the police found no trace of Young. However, around 1:00 a.m. the following morning, residents on Stemmen Road, about 6 miles from Young's home, reported hearing noises and suspected someone was on their property. Police responded quickly and, using their headlights, spotted a figure crouching behind a shed in the front yard. The figure was soon identified as Hannah, recognized from the Endangered Missing Persons Alert. She was dirty, extremely agitated, and covered in blood. When Young realized the approaching figures were police officers, she ran toward them, crying and shouting hysterically. She clung to the officer's arm, screaming that her husband was trying to kill her and pleading for protection. Young was immediately taken to the hospital, where medical professionals treated her injuries. Fortunately, Young's injuries were not life-threatening. The search for Minho, the prime suspect in her attempted murder, continued. The police received a tip the next morning around 7:00 a.m. about a suspicious vehicle parked along the Jolly's Western Trail. Upon arriving at the scene, they found Minho in the Dodge Grand Caravan. It appeared he was searching for Young, likely shocked to discover the grave empty. The police promptly arrested him. Minho faced serious charges including first-degree attempted murder, threats to kill, kidnapping, assault, and domestic abuse. Surprisingly, he pleaded not guilty to all charges except for domestic abuse. A preliminary hearing took place on October 19, 2022, in Tarrant County Superior Court. Young, unable to attend in person, sent a victim's advocate to read her statement. She urged the court to keep Minho in custody, expressing her fear for her safety and the trauma he had inflicted. Court Commissioner Nathan Crow found probable cause for the charges against Minho and decided against granting bail. Additionally, Crow ordered that Minho must not contact Young or any other witnesses. Despite this, Minho's public attorney requested a reduced bond of $150,000, arguing it would suffice for detention. The defense attorney also cited Minho's struggles with mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, homelessness, and isolation from family and friends, advocating for a more lenient sentence. In his final statement, Minho expressed remorse, stating, "If I could go back to that day, I would have gone into the house." Ironically, these were the same issues that had prompted Young to seek a divorce, though it did not excuse his actions, particularly the attempted murder that could have also traumatized their children. "I didn't think." Young recalled telling him to think about our children, to which he replied, "I don't mean anything today. I'm going to kill you." Before sentencing, Young addressed the court, saying, "Since that day, my children's and my lives have fallen apart. I'm left to live with the mental shock and health issues for the rest of my life." Recounting the traumatic memories of the incident, Young and the prosecution sought the maximum possible sentence for Minho after a thorough investigation. After a trial process, Minho eventually pleaded guilty to the charges nearly a year and a half following his arrest. On April 22, 2024, Tarrant County Superior Court handed down the verdict. According to court documents, Minho was convicted of one count of second-degree attempted murder and domestic abuse. During sentencing, the judge opted for the maximum sentence permissible under Washington State's guidelines. Judge Mary Sue Wilson remarked that the crimes committed by Minho were horrendous, emphasizing the physical pain and fear Young had endured, which were beyond words. She praised Young for her remarkable courage and expressed hope that she could focus on her emotional recovery and mental health treatment. Judge Wilson sentenced Minho to 13 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community custody. By the time he completes his sentence, Minho will be around 67 years old, hopefully too old to pose any further threat to Young or others. With Minho now behind bars for his actions and serving a lengthy sentence reflecting the severity of his crimes, this case concludes. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence, while also highlighting Young's incredible strength and bravery. She navigated an unimaginable situation driven by her determination to protect her children and survive, which is truly inspiring. As we reflect on these events, we hope that Young and her children can find peace and healing after everything they've endured. Perhaps they can move forward into a safer and happier chapter of their lives. Meanwhile, Minho may use his time behind bars to deeply contemplate the consequences of his actions and the pain he has caused. Although the legal proceedings are over, this case sparks ongoing discussions about improving protections and support for those facing domestic violence. It underscores the importance of intervening early to prevent escalation and ensure victims receive the help they need. After a challenging trial process, Minho's plea of guilty nearly a year and a half after his arrest marked a significant moment in the pursuit of justice for Young. On April 22, 2024, the Thiron County Superior Court rendered its verdict, convicting Minho on counts of second-degree attempted murder and domestic abuse based on the harrowing events that unfolded. During the sentencing phase, the judge's decision to impose the maximum allowable sentence under Washington state's guidelines underscored the severity of Minho's actions. Judge Mary Sue Wilson, in delivering the sentence, acknowledged the heinous nature of the crimes committed, recognizing the immeasurable physical and psychological trauma inflicted upon Young. She commended Young for her exceptional bravery throughout the ordeal and expressed hopes for her continued emotional healing and recovery. The court's decision mandated Minho serve 13 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community custody, ensuring he would be closely monitored upon release. Given the length of his sentence, Minho would be around 67 years old upon completing his term, potentially diminishing any threat he could pose to Young or others in the future. With Minho now incarcerated and justice served, the focus shifted to Young and her children's journey toward healing. The resilience and fortitude Young displayed amidst unimaginable circumstances serve as a testament to her unwavering commitment to protect her family and reclaim her life. Their story resonates as a beacon of hope and courage for survivors of domestic violence everywhere, illustrating the power of perseverance and community support in overcoming adversity. Looking ahead, the hope is that Young and her children can find solace and rebuild their lives, free from the shadows cast by Minho's actions. While the legal proceedings have reached their conclusion, the case continues to prompt critical conversations about enhancing protections and resources for individuals facing domestic violence. It serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need for proactive measures to prevent such tragedies and ensure all victims receive the support and intervention they deserve. As the community reflects on this chapter,
there remains a collective resolve to advocate for policies and initiatives that promote safety, justice, and healing for survivors of domestic abuse. By amplifying awareness and fostering empathy, we strive to create a society where every individual feels empowered to seek help and break the cycle of violence. In closing, while the journey towards recovery may be ongoing for
Young and her family, their resilience and courage inspire us all to work towards a future where such stories of survival and triumph become more prevalent than those of suffering and injustice. Amidst the vibrant energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a grim and tragic turn. Her story captivated a nation, shedding light on the potential dangers that can lurk within the seemingly ordinary moments of our lives. Samantha, a spirited and ambitious young woman, radiated positivity on the University of South Carolina campus. Yet, little did anyone anticipate that a routine night out would spiral into a series of events that would devastate those who knew her. Born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, Samantha grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. As a child, she attended the University of South Carolina, where she pursued a degree in political science. At the time of her untimely demise, Samantha, a senior in college, had plans to graduate in 2019 and continue her studies at Drexel University School of Law, aspiring to specialize in international law. She had earned a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers. A member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority, Samantha also seized opportunities to broaden her horizons by studying abroad in Barcelona and exploring Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Described as remarkably beautiful, Samantha possessed a captivating smile that illuminated the lives of those around her. She was also romantically involved with a young man named Greg. The couple shared a deep bond, staying connected every day through constant texting and calling. They envisioned a future together, with plans for Greg to move in with Samantha and support her as she pursued law school. Everything seemed promising until the evening of Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha failed to return to her apartment, signaling a troubling turn of events. On the preceding evening of March 28th, Samantha intended to join her roommate and friends for a night out in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend Greg couldn't be with them as he was in his hometown, he encouraged her to enjoy herself. Samantha, feeling somber due to news of a family member's illness, sought distraction and companionship with her friends, seeing the outing as an opportunity to uplift her spirits. The group explored various bars before settling at the Bird Dog Bar in the lively area of 5 Points, a popular hangout for students. Despite having a good time, Samantha kept in touch with Greg, expressing her longing for his presence and emotional support. Although they had plans to reunite the following weekend, Greg chose to stay put, maintaining constant communication with her. Around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to return to her apartment alone and ordered an Uber, a common practice among her peers. Little did she know, this decision would lead her into the hands of a murderer as she awaited her ride. At approximately 2:04 a.m., Samantha had her final phone conversation with Greg. She informed him of her departure, stating she was on her way home and had hailed an Uber, a routine she had practiced numerous times before to navigate the distance between the bars and her residence. A few minutes after summoning the Uber, a vehicle approached the curb where Samantha and other patrons awaited their rides. Surveillance cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize it was meant for someone else. Correcting her course, she returned to her position on the sidewalk. Samantha, dressed in an orange shirt and black pants, continued to wait. Soon after, a black Chevrolet Impala driven by Nathaniel David Rowland arrived at the spot in front of her. Assuming it was her ride, Samantha bid farewell to Greg and approached the vehicle. After a brief exchange with the driver, she entered the back seat, unaware of the danger that awaited her. As soon as Samantha entered the car, it swiftly accelerated away. Moments later, the Uber she had originally requested arrived at the designated pickup spot. However, unable to locate Samantha, the driver canceled the request and departed. From that moment onward, only Samantha and the driver of the Impala were aware of the mistaken entry. Later CCTV footage revealed the black Chevrolet Impala circling the area several times before focusing on Samantha. Familiar with the routine of college students gathering in 5 Points after bar closures, observers grew suspicious of the driver's actions, suggesting a deliberate intent. Meanwhile, Samantha's attentive boyfriend, Greg, monitored her journey via the Find My Friends app to ensure her safety. He became concerned when he noticed her heading in the opposite direction of her apartment. Initially dismissing it as a detour to a friend's house, Greg texted her to confirm her well-being. However, he received no response. Concerned, he attempted to call her, but Samantha did not answer her phone. Greg persisted, repeatedly texting Samantha until he noticed that his messages showed as delivered but not read, indicating that Samantha hadn't read any of his texts. This unusual behavior, coupled with Samantha's phone ceasing to share its location, deeply unsettled Greg, as such occurrences had never happened before. Despite considering the possibility that Samantha had misplaced her phone in the Uber, Greg reached out to her friends and roommate to inquire about her whereabouts, or if she had safely reached home. Regrettably, no one had heard from or seen Samantha. Hoping for her return by morning, Greg attempted to rest. However, when Samantha failed to appear, her roommates grew increasingly worried and reported her missing. Greg, deeply concerned, drove 2 hours to Columbia to aid in the search. Within 3 to 4 hours of filing the missing person report, turkey hunters stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young woman, later identified as Samantha Josephson, in a wooded area in New Zion, approximately 65 miles away from 5 Points. Dismayed by the grim discovery, the hunters promptly contacted 911, prompting swift response from local law enforcement. Following an autopsy, it became evident that Samantha had been subjected to a brutal and violent attack. Her body bore over 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries spanning her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet, painting a harrowing picture of the horrific ordeal she endured. It was determined that Samantha had attempted to defend herself as her fingernails were found mutilated, likely a result of her efforts to shield herself from a sharp, double-bladed knife. The autopsy revealed a severe loss of blood, with Samantha's body containing only 20 millimoles compared to the average human's 4 liters. Further investigation unveiled surveillance footage from the bar that night, capturing Samantha entering a black Chevrolet Impala. The car's repeated circling suggested premeditation, as if the driver was scouting for a victim. Investigators discovered that Samantha mistakenly entered the killer's car, believing it to be her Uber. The actual Uber arrived shortly afterward, indicating that Samantha Zasilan was likely not the driver of the Impal. It was theorized that the killer may have employed child-proof locks to trap Samantha inside, preventing her escape. With this information, investigators swiftly released descriptions of the car to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. Just before he could strike again, officers on routine patrol spotted the black Chevrolet Impala cruising the very same area where Samantha was kidnapped. At 3:00 a.m. on March 30th, they pulled the car over, prompting the driver to flee. After a brief chase, officers apprehended the suspect, identified as Nathaniel Rowland, a 24-year-old resident of New Zion. Upon inspecting the vehicle, officers found a child's car seat in the back, surrounded by what appeared to be bloodstains, prompting them to call for backup. Homicide detectives took charge, thoroughly searching the car and discovering profuse amounts of blood on the passenger seat, in the trunk, and a bloody footprint on a rear window. Samantha's cell phone was also found on the floorboards, revealing Rowland's attempt to sell it at a pawn shop earlier that day. The presence of activated child locks confirmed suspicions that Rowland had trapped Samantha in his car. Additionally, various cleaning products were discovered, suggesting an attempt to conceal evidence, though traces of blood remained, indicating an incomplete cleanup. During interrogation, Rowland adamantly denied any involvement in Samantha's kidnapping and murder, despite mounting evidence against him. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Josephson maintained his innocence in the face of accusations. A physical examination of Rowland following his arrest revealed traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails, a perplexing discovery considering her genetic markers were present in him. However, none of Rowland's DNA was found on Samantha's body, a highly unusual circumstance. Detectives, piecing together the grim details of Samantha's final moments, speculated that she fell victim to a blitz attack. The presence of child-proof locks in the car at the time of Rowland's arrest led investigators to conclude that he activated this feature as soon as Samantha entered the vehicle, rendering her unable to escape. Helpless, Samantha believed she was in the care of her Uber driver, unaware of the impending danger. As Rowland ferociously attacked her with a double-bladed knife, Samantha struggled to defend herself, resulting in multiple stab wounds to her hands and mangled fingernails. The excessive force inflicted upon her painted a grim picture of the relentless assault she endured. It's understandable that Samantha was unable to scratch her attacker, which would have potentially left his skin cells under her nails. After committing the dreadful act, Rowland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, a location known only to locals, where he callously dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Rowland brazenly resumed his normal activities, spending much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had occurred. His residence, situated mere minutes away from where Samantha's remains were discovered, provided further incriminating evidence against him. A deeper dive into Rowland's background revealed him to be a devout churchgoer who had briefly attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although his graduation status and employment history remained unclear. Rowland had a prior felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under false pretenses. Additionally, there were allegations of him being involved in a carjacking incident with another individual. A woman was carjacked by two men, one of whom was Rowland, who assaulted her and coerced her to drive to an ATM to withdraw money. They then forced her to return home, where they further robbed her of belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Despite Rowland not being convicted of this crime, he was found to have sold some of the stolen items, including the PlayStation 4. Upon obtaining a search warrant for Rowland's girlfriend's apartment in New Zion, named Maria Howard, detectives discovered incriminating evidence in the trash bins. Among the items found were a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Rowland, heavily stained with Samantha's blood. Additionally, they found a white sheet with blood, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood, and a two-bladed knife with apparent blood stains. Subsequent tests confirmed that the blood found on these items matched Samantha Josephson's. With the evidence mounting rapidly against him, Roland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, as well as the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial proved arduous for the family, with Roland pleading not guilty, asserting his innocence despite the substantial evidence against him. During the trial, which commenced in the summer of 2021, Roland's defense team argued that his DNA was not found on the victim, attempting to paint him as an innocent man. However, prosecutors countered this defense with the overwhelming evidence collected in the case, refuting Roland's claims of innocence. The evidence presented included CCTV footage depicting Roland's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, the discovery of Samantha's blood in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations of attempted use of her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, and cell phone trackers indicating their devices were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Roland lived in close proximity to where Samantha's remains were found. A handwriting expert was consulted to analyze a list found in Roland's home, which included items like duct tape, gloves, a black flip phone, gasoline, and matches. The expert testified that it was likely Roland wrote the list, indicating premeditation. Prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including an individual who witnessed Roland cleaning the murder weapon, the pawnshop owner to whom he attempted to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend, who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Roland's car following the murder. Despite the mounting evidence, Roland opted not to call any witnesses, and none of his family members testified on his behalf. He maintained his innocence and pleaded with the judge. However, it took the jury only an hour to reach a guilty verdict. Following Nathaniel Roland's conviction, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In response to Samantha's tragic murder, her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, took action to prevent similar tragedies. They established the What's My Name Foundation, advocating for safety measures in rideshare services. The foundation encourages people to ask the driver to confirm their name before entering the vehicle, promoting a safety protocol called SAMI, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. In the aftermath of Samantha's death, the rideshare industry also implemented additional safety measures, such as issuing personalized 4-digit codes to confirm the correct vehicle. Samantha's passing deeply impacted her family and friends, leaving an indelible mark of grief. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the unpredictability of tragedy. May Samantha Lee Josephson's memory inspire us to remain vigilant, prioritize the safety of others, and strive towards a world characterized by compassion and security. Why would a friend eliminate an entire family? Sometimes, people we consider friends and trust deeply can turn out to be the very ones who exploit our vulnerabilities. Typically, friends know everything about us, but occasionally, people who only pretend to be our friends might later betray or harm us. For most people, friendship brings meaning to life. Supporting and assisting a friend is paramount, but sometimes the intent to help can turn into a tragedy. The tragic loss of a young woman named Christy Shawn and her husband Joseph Codd in 2015 shocked the quiet provincial town of Lear, North Carolina. This incident was one of the most brutal crimes in the history of this small community. At the time of the tragedy, the couple was joyously anticipating the addition of a new family member. However, the most horrifying aspect was that their perpetrator was someone they knew well, trusted, and considered a friend. Furthermore, they were not his only victims. Christy Maria Shawn Codd was born on September 3, 1976 in Madrid, Spain, the only child of American military personnel. Her father was a U.S. Air Force soldier, and due to his duties, the family frequently moved from place to place. They did not stay long in Spain and lived in various European countries before returning to the United States. Christy began her schooling in New Orleans, Louisiana, but within a year, the family moved to Texas, then to Illinois, and after that, Shawn spent several years in Latin American countries. Such a nomadic lifestyle had its benefits. Christy spoke multiple languages from an early age and had the opportunity to experience the cultures and traditions of other countries. However, during her teenage years, she faced challenges in settling into new groups and making friends in new places. Just as she would start to settle in, it was time to pack up, move, and change schools and social circles. Yet, it was precisely because of these constant changes that she developed excellent communication skills. Christy easily found common ground with various people and was known as a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. Additionally, from an early age, she actively participated in sports. Christy was always active, engaging in gymnastics and swimming, and even taking kickboxing classes for a while. After finishing school, her father retired from the military, and the family settled in Biloxi, Mississippi. It was there that Christy finally made lasting friendships and discovered a new passion: cooking. As a teenager, she loved experimenting in the kitchen, creating culinary masterpieces that earned her much praise and attention. Determined to further her skills, Christy completed culinary courses, and her parents anticipated she would become a professional chef. However, another talent emerged: acting. A beautiful and ambitious young woman, Christy decided to pursue acting, enrolling in an academy and moving to Los Angeles. She seized every opportunity, appearing in commercials, performing on theater stages, and taking on roles in high-profile Hollywood productions as an extra or stunt performer. Notably, she had a minor role in the Terminator franchise, performing risky stunts. In 2000, Christy graduated from the acting academy but had yet to land any significant roles despite her striking appearance and evident talent. She then decided to focus on her culinary skills and sports, turning these passions into a profitable business. Christy participated in several popular culinary TV shows, becoming a well-known and recognizable figure. She reached the finals of one season of the next Food Network Star, though she didn't win due to mixed reviews of her culinary experiments. Undeterred, Christy garnered considerable attention, amassing thousands of followers on social media who eagerly kept up with her life and creations. She promoted a healthy lifestyle, offering advice on nutrition and developing her own exercise routines to maintain good physical condition. About a year later, Christy founded her own catering company, providing banquet services for various events and retailing prepared culinary products. Her business stood out for its focus on proper and healthy eating, featuring her original recipes. Christy soon contemplated starting her own farm to grow healthy, environmentally friendly produce, aiming to expand her business even further. While growing her catering business, Christy also conducted online courses on proper nutrition and developed several other projects. In 2012, Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, better known as JT, a casting director responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated television projects. They first met at a studio in Los Angeles during the casting for a culinary show Christy wanted to participate in. They instantly clicked. Joseph, nearly 7 years older than Christy, and in the process of divorcing, was utterly charmed by her beauty and charisma. He began to court her, and soon they started a romantic relationship. Joseph supported Christy's ideas, and together they began working on their dream project of owning a farm. The couple decided to leave Los Angeles and move from sunny California to North Carolina. They sold Christy's successful catering business, and Joseph sold his house in Hollywood. They invested all the proceeds in buying a large piece of land in the town of Leicester. The couple acquired a spacious, cozy house and nearly 1 acre of land to realize their dream. Joseph continued to collaborate with TV channels remotely, while Christy actively developed her personal blog about proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. Their relationship was marked by love and harmony, making them an ideal couple. In August 2014, Christy and Joseph formalized their relationship with a lavish wedding attended by several hundred guests, including relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and even some fans. They were truly happy and full of plans for their future. 3 months after the wedding, the newlyweds learned they were going to become parents for the first time. Their joy knew no bounds. After the new year, during a routine ultrasound examination, the doctor informed the couple they were expecting a daughter. A few days later, during a phone call with her mother, Christy mentioned they had decided to name their firstborn Skylar. Everything was going perfectly, and the pregnancy was progressing smoothly. However, their happiness was tragically short-lived. When Christy was 5 months pregnant and actively preparing for the arrival of their baby, a mysterious disappearance occurred, leaving their future uncertain. Christy regularly called her parents, who lived in another state, sharing updates on her well-being and chatting with her mother, sometimes for an hour at a time. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother couldn't reach her daughter, but initially didn't think much of it. The situation repeated the next day, with calls going unanswered. When both Christy's and Joseph's phones were turned off by March 15th, Christy's mother became alarmed. Since Christy's and Joseph's parents lived in other states, they couldn't quickly check on the couple's home. Christy's mother called a close friend of her daughter's, a woman named Cecily who lived nearby, to check on them. When Cecily arrived at the Codd residence, she saw both of the couple's personal cars parked at the house. However, the front door was locked, and no one responded to knocks and shouts. The couple's phones had been off for 3 days, which was highly suspicious. Through a window, Cecily saw the couple's beloved dogs, who they cherished and would never willingly leave alone, locked inside one of the rooms. Cecily decided to walk around the house and noticed that the back door lock had been forcefully broken, indicating someone had attempted to enter or had indeed entered the home. She immediately informed Christy's mother, who then promptly called the police. The responding officers confirmed the back door had been broken into and discovered disarray inside, indicating someone had been searching for something. According to the family, some valuables had been stolen, including a jewelry box and a breached safe in the couple's bedroom. However, there were no signs of blood, struggle, or evidence that the couple had been detained or taken by force. The perpetrator had acted cautiously, leaving no fingerprints or DNA traces. Despite the experienced officer's lack of optimism, the relatives clung to the faint hope that 45-year-old Joseph and his 38-year-old pregnant wife Christy were still alive. In the initial days, the investigation stalled. There were no clues or significant evidence to be found. The missing couple had no enemies or ill wishers, making it challenging to reconstruct what had happened. The couple's phones were left at home, last used on March 12th, with only incoming calls recorded the next day before the devices died. The police decided to question the couple's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything strange or suspicious recently. An interesting detail emerged when a neighbor living across the street saw another local resident throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Codd's home on the morning of March 15th. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but when he learned of the couple's disappearance, he thought the information might be useful to the investigation. Checking the contents of the bins was no longer possible as the trash had been taken to the dump the day before, meaning any potential evidence would need to be searched for there. But first, the police wanted to speak with the person who had discarded the strange bundle. The person turned out to be 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, who lived on the same street and was well acquainted with the couple, even considered a close family friend. Robert was a handyman and had helped Christy and Joseph when they first moved into their new home. They became friends, and the couple later invited him to their wedding. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious about this, except that other locals described Owens as a strange and unpredictable person. On March 16th, Robert was summoned to the police station for questioning. Initially, he denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed ignorance about the bundle. There wasn't much to charge him with beyond the unsubstantiated claim of another neighbor. However, that evening, the situation dramatically changed when the very same large, strange bundle was found at the landfill. Inside were items from the missing couple's home, including Robert's clear fingerprints and DNA traces on partially burnt clothing belonging to the couple, a blanket, and a throw from their home, all stained with blood. This evidence confirmed police suspicions that Christy and Joseph were no longer alive. Doubts were dispelled when police searched the suspect's home and found charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove. Robert was then brought in as a suspect in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and the neighbor's pregnant wife. Despite his denials and inconsistent statements, he eventually confessed after several hours, and his admissions were truly shocking. He admitted to the double fatal incident but claimed it was accidental. On the evening of March 12th, Robert decided to visit his friend's home but swerved off the road to avoid hitting a dog, getting stuck in the mud. He walked to the Codd's home and asked for help to push his car out. The helpful couple agreed to assist, but while they were pushing the car, Robert, sitting at the wheel, accidentally confused the gas and brake pedals, striking and running over the couple. Terrified, he believed he would be accused of killing them, so he chose not to call the police or emergency services and decided to cover up the incident. Robert claimed he returned to the Codd's house, broke in through the back door, and took blankets from the bedroom to move the bodies, which he wasn't sure were deceased. He wrapped the bodies, placed them in the bed of his pickup truck, and drove them to his home. There, he dismembered them in his bathroom using a saw and a small axe. He then fired up his stove and began incrementally throwing pieces of their bodies into the fire, hoping they would burn completely. Robert packed the blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear of the deceased into a trash bag and disposed of it in a dumpster, assuming that once the trash was taken to the landfill, no one would be able to find anything. He then staged a burglary, stealing money and valuables from the Codd's home, which he pawned the next day. The cruelty with which Robert disposed of his friends' bodies and the eerie calmness with which he recounted the events shocked even seasoned police officers. In his home, they found a saw and an axe stained with blood, skin, and bone, fragments of the deceased. Robert hadn't even bothered to clean the tools or attempt to hide them, confident that the investigation would never lead to him since he had left no traces at the Codd's house. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owens' stove belonged to the missing couple. Law enforcement decided to delve deeper into the suspect's background. Robert was unmarried, had no children, and barely maintained any contact with his relatives. He had previously lived in Asheville, North Carolina, but in 2000 he bought land in Leicester and later built a house there. It turned out his name was linked to an unresolved crime from 15 years prior that occurred in Asheville. In 2000, Robert's close friend Zeb Wayne Quinn, who was only 18 at the time, mysteriously disappeared. Robert and Zeb had known each other since school, lived nearby, and were friends. Zeb was undergoing military training and also worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2, 2000, after finishing his shift, Quinn met with Robert, planning to drive to Leicester to buy a new car, but he never returned home. A few days later, his Mazda Protege was found in another part of town, parked with its headlights on. Inside, a heart was drawn on the window with red lipstick. The car's owner was never found. The car also had damage and scratches with traces of paint from another vehicle. The last person to see Zeb was Robert, whose car also had damage containing paint particles from Zeb's car. Robert told a peculiar and implausible story. Shortly after they headed towards Leicester, Zeb blinked at him to stop, saying he received a message on his pager and urgently needed to use a payphone. He asked Robert to wait and drove off to the nearest gas station, returning 10 minutes later looking frantic and saying their plans had changed before driving off in an unknown direction, hitting his friend's car in the process. It was also discovered that Zeb had a romantic relationship with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose former boyfriend Wesley Smith had threatened Zeb with harm if he didn't stop seeing Misty. Taylor, Smith, and Owens were questioned in this case, but due to a lack of evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had alibis, which was not the case for Robert. A significant amount of money Zeb had with him to buy the car, and his pager disappeared from his car, and it was never determined what message he had received, if any. The investigation leaned towards the theory that there was no message at all. Another oddity was that the day after Zeb's disappearance, a man called Walmart claiming to be him, stating he wouldn't be coming to work for the next few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded strange and unfamiliar, not like Zeb at all. The phone call was traced to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. During questioning, Owens unexpectedly claimed that he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb sped away. No new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remained unsolved, with Zeb Quinn listed as missing ever since. However, 15 years after these events, Owens was interrogated again, suspected of being directly involved in his longtime friend's disappearance. As the investigation into the Codd's disappearance unfolded, new and unexpected details about Robert's past and his involvement in old cases began to surface, shedding light on a potential pattern of behavior that linked him to multiple unresolved crimes. In June 2015, the case of Zeb Quinn was reopened and the investigation resumed. Initially, it seemed unlikely that law enforcement would uncover any new information. Robert recounted the same story he had told back in 2000, indicating he had nothing new to add. However, a more thorough search of his property revealed something very peculiar. In a detached concrete slab at Owens's home, a strangely walled-off cavity was discovered. Inside were small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged to undergo DNA analysis, making it impossible to definitively determine if they belonged to Zeb Quinn. A neighbor's interview provided even more unexpected results. An elderly man living nearby remembered something from January 2000, when young Owens had just purchased the land and was starting to build his house. One evening, Owens started a fire that emitted a sickly sweet, nauseating smell. The neighbor confronted him because the wind was blowing the stench in his direction, nearly making him sick. Soon after, the fire pit was covered with concrete, which seemed highly unusual, but Robert claimed he planned to build a small fountain there, which he never did. The neighbor had forgotten about the foul-smelling fire until 15 years later when police showed up at the property. Ultimately, Owens confessed to being complicit in a crime, telling an entirely new story. According to him, Zeb was killed by his own uncle, Walter Owens, who had been hired by Wesley Smith to eliminate Misty's new boyfriend, whom he still loved. Robert claimed he was unaware at the time, and his uncle had asked him to lure Zeb to a secluded spot. When the three of them ended up in a wooded area on the road to Leicester, the uncle ordered them to stop the car and then signaled Zeb to do the same. Once Zeb stepped out, Walter shot him and then instructed his nephew to help dismember and package the body, which was burned on Robert's property that same night and encased in concrete. Interrogating Walter Owens was no longer possible as he had died several years before his nephew's horrific confession. No evidence was found at the supposed crime scene, and the story sounded very unconvincing. Initially, Robert faced charges of first-degree double murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment and concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery. These charges could have led to the death penalty, but it was revealed that the defendant had long suffered from depression and mental disorders, taking powerful medication, which his lawyer used as a foundation for defense. Thanks to a well-constructed defense strategy, the accused could have been found insane and sent to a psychiatric clinic instead of prison, which neither the prosecution nor the victim's relatives found satisfactory. At the same time, the investigation into Quinn's case began,